This is my persuasive speech practice session 3. How do you feel when something that belongs to you is taken from you? If you own something or something is promised to be yours, it's pretty rough when someone just claims it as their own. That's how Native Americans felt when American colonists continued to break promises and take their land away from them during and after the Revolutionary War. Most Native Americans fought with the British to hold on to the land they knew as their own. Today, we believe in treating others justly, but we didn't behave so in the past. I'm going to prove to you that Native Americans had every right to fight alongside the British because, first, Americans tried to overrun Native American land. Second, Britain promised if they won they would protect Native American land. And finally, Americans didn't keep their promises towards Native Americans. This all begins with how the Americans tried to overrun Native American land. Native Americans were perfectly happy with what they had. They made do with the land they owned and were peaceful for the most part. Then explorers from across the world showed up on their shores. Suddenly, America became the point of interest across the globe. Britain sent colonists in to settle in American land and claim it as their own. This is when problems began to arise. Many of the problems took place after independence in America. Native Americans that sided with the British knew that if Americans won, issues would arise, and they did. White settlers claimed jurisdiction over Georgia and the Cherokees. They believed this land was rightfully theirs and they should just take it. The Cherokees were removed from Georgia and forced to live in Oklahoma. This land was theirs, but they were pushed out as if they were trash that had stuck around long enough and needed to be thrown away. Another problem occurred with the Indian Removal Act. The President of America was allowed to negotiate treaties and remove remaining eastern Indians to west of the Mississippi. These trips from east to west caused disease, hunger, and ultimately death. With the Dawes Act of 1877, the Native Americans fully lost control of their land. This act was put into place because Americans continually attempted to exert control over Native Americans. This act ended Native American communal holding of property, which means they weren't allowed to own any property, whatsoever. Now, Britain knew what was going on in the colonies way before any of these acts were passed. That is why they promised they would protect Native Americans. Native Americans saw the good in siding with the British. First of all, Britain offered trade goods. They owned sources of alcohol, blankets, knives, and firearms. Native Americans grew to be dependent on these goods. Britain also offered Native American land. Native Americans were rapidly losing the land battle with the colonists. If Americans won the Revolution, Native Americans would lose all rights to land. Finally, and probably most significantly, Britain offered sovereignty. Americans were working harder and harder to get Native Americans under their control. Native Americans believed they had rights, and Britain would allow them to hold on to said rights. And as Britain fully intended to keep those promises, even though their loss of control over America destroyed their intentions, American colonists made promises they had no intention of keeping. The first promise they made was that Native American land would be theirs forever. Americans bought land from Native Americans, telling them it would belong to them forever. However, traders were allowed to settle in Native American land along with travelers and colonists. Native Americans soon realized that this land that was supposedly theirs forever would not be theirs much longer. The next issue that arose with Native Americans took place in the Black Hills of South Dakota. The United States government signed an agreement to buy the gold-rich Black Hills of South Dakota. Only a few members of the Sioux tribe owning that land signed this agreement when the Sioux 1869 treaty stated that at least 3/4 of the men must agree. Americans didn't listen to this. A few were enough in their eyes and they began to take over. Yet another issue with Native Americans took place with the Northwest Ordinance. This ordinance states that all men are created equal and have rights. The Native Americans were bribed and threatened, not treated like equals but lesser inhabitants in the way of future progress. They were treated as though they were below colonists and shut out of the progression of the country. As you can see, the Native Americans had many logical motives to side with the British in the Revolutionary War. It's very clear that Americans tried to take over Native American land by making and breaking promises, while Britain promised and planned to protect them. How would you feel if something was just taken from you like that? I know I would feel hurt and betrayed. We should behave justly towards others, even though we didn't in the past. The need to be free doesn't excuse how Americans treated Native Americans. Americans shouldn't have allowed the goal of freedom to swallow their morals towards the Native Americans. The land belonged to them, and we took it. There's nothing just about that. Alright, that's the end of that one.